This is a short story, The Idealists Club. I was staring out at the parking lot in my apartment complex, waiting for my body to wake up, drinking a lukewarm cup of coffee when the phone rang. I recognized the number and had the feeling that it was bad news because nobody calls at 5 in the morning with good news. They found him dead in the cabin, she said over the phone. They can't yet say for certain the cause of death, but there were a lot of empty and broken bottles and other drug paraphernalia. I'm so sorry, I said, and I was. On the other side of the line was AJ's mother. I had known her since I was 10 years old when I first met AJ. But now AJ, my best friend, was dead. I used to think we would change the world together, I said. She started to cry. I told her I would bring clementines and help with whatever needed to be done. She said thank you and hung up. I never thought that 5 years after high school I would still be in my hometown, working retail at a hardware store. I finished my coffee, washed my face, brushed my teeth, and grabbed the cleanest clothes I could find from the pile on the floor. Then I hit the road. On the drive to Dorothy, I can not help but wonder if maybe I could have saved AJ, or at least helped him more than I had. I knew he was jobless and homeless and had just recently moved back to the cabin. I also knew about his drinking problem, though I never mentioned it to Dorothy or anyone else because of how much of a nasty, mean drunk his father was. I had talked to AJ a few days prior, but I was too busy with work to visit the remote corner of West Virginia where the cabin was. I was stressed out with work and had opening shifts all week. He told me it was okay. He told me he was fine, but I could hear the slurring of his words and knew that he was far from fine. I crossed back into Maryland and arrived at Dorothy's house about 2 hours later. She was waiting in the driveway when I pulled up. She looked the same as always, a small, hunched over Italian lady in a shawl, just with a few more gray hairs due to age. She hugged me like she always had and offered me tea. I gave her the clementines and she smiled and told me to take off my coat. I smiled and reminded her that I was here to help her. Oh, yes, she said, quietly before going back to the stove to make tea. A few minutes later, she came back with tea. Then she started to cry as she handed me the cup. I don't think I had ever seen her cry before. I reminded her that I could help with the paperwork or cleaning the cabin or whatever she needed. She waved my words away, then started a long story about how good AJ was at soccer, how strong of a runner he was when he was a boy. I offered a few more times to help, but she just waved me off and I let her talk. She talked about the neighbors, about politics, but mostly about AJ. At 9, a police car came, and the policeman knocked and said he had questions about AJ. He told us not to worry. Dorothy answered his questions while starting soup. The policeman left at 10. I asked Dorothy what I could help with. She told me just stopping by was enough. I knew enough not to argue with her. I went back to my car and made the 2 hour drive back to West Virginia to my crummy apartment. I phoned my boss and told him the situation and that I was going to need some time off to deal with it. He snorted, but then told me to take all the time I needed, though afterward I would owe him big. Dorothy phoned me at 9 that night. She told me she was glad she had someone to talk to during all of this. I never could talk to my husband, and now that he is gone, I told her not to worry. I told her to rest, and that time would make things better, even though I wasn't sure they would. She said thank you again and hung up. A little later, Alicia called. I had been going out with her for a while, and I liked her, but I didn't know what to say to her right now. She could tell I was distracted, and I told her about the death and about the day. She asked if I was okay and if there was anything she could do, and I told her I was fine, I just needed some time and space. She said okay, but I could hear the sadness and disappointment in her voice. I didn't tell her, or anyone else for that matter, that the same thought had been rattling around my head the whole day. I should have killed myself a long time ago, not AJ. He had so much promise. Everyone loved him. He was so strong, determined, capable. When we lived in the cabin together, he was always starting the fires, telling us where to plant onions. He was the one who scared off the door to door salesmen. And even when I was a kid, he was always the one to stand up and fight when I was too scared to venture, even outside. But I put on the TV so I didn't have to think anymore. I watched Matlock, the new rebooted version, and didn't pay attention. When it got late, I washed my face, brushed my teeth, took my antidepressant, and went to sleep. Or rather, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and the light from the parking lot, and I just kept thinking, I should have killed myself a long time ago. Not AJ. Not AJ. I fell asleep at about 2 in the morning. Chapter 2: How It All Began. The first time I met AJ, I didn't like him. We lived 3 houses apart and went to the same school in rural Western Maryland, but we were in completely different crowds. He played sports, hung out with his dad or his friends' dogs and horses. I played Nintendo and hung out in the fields and forests behind my house, or I sat quietly with my family. But it wasn't just the fact that we were in different friend groups that made me dislike him. He also had the habit of picking me during phys ed class to throw the dodgeball at as hard as he could, and then laugh about it. At the time, I didn't know his story and didn't really want to. We were 10, and as far as I was concerned, he was just a mean kid, a bully. Anyway, we didn't seem to have much in common. I was a nerd. I played games and watched cartoons and read about geography and hung out by myself most of the time. I didn't mind it. I would much rather be alone than bullied or listening to my parents argued. They ignored me most of the time anyway. In hushed tones, they would call me a loser or pathetic. On most days, I would get home from school, do homework, and hike the fields behind my house. My father would likely be in his wood shop, and my mom out shopping, but I didn't want to be there when they got home and argued. Most evenings, I planned to come in right at dinner time, eat, sit, and eat dinner, which was done in silence before the altar of television. After that, I would hide in my room and draw. Sometimes I felt sad and I didn't know how to deal with things like bullies or schoolwork or loneliness, but I learned from experience that crying only made my parents argue more, so I kept it all to myself. Even if it was a sad and lonely childhood, we lived in the country, and our neighbors were cornfields and horses and houses with 2 to 5 acres, so we were not bothered often. But then one day, when I was 11, a new neighbor moved in. Alicia came running to my house one day and pounded on the door. I answered because my parents were ignoring it, but I wasn't sure what to do when I saw her there. No one ever came to see me. She told me to stop being an idiot and play with her, so we explored those fields and forests together, the fields and forests that were now starting to be filled with construction equipment and model houses for new planned communities. I followed 5 steps behind, unsure of what to do. One day, as we were watching Ren and Stimpy, she told me we should be boyfriend and girlfriend. I said I didn't know. She laughed, then tackled me and tickled me. I hated it and turned away, but she said, I know you like me too, and since I didn't want to hurt her feelings, I agreed that from now on, we were boyfriend and girlfriend. I was more of a socially inept nerd than a genius, but she was always reading, always spouting off facts and questions about 700-page novels I had only just read the titles of. I would sometimes know what she was talking about, if it was about The Hobbit or Star Wars. But when she started talking about literature with a capital L, or science or history, I was lost. I think she saw me as being like her. She never fit in socially and always had odd tastes in media and fashion that made her stand out, and not in a good way. But I wasn't a genius like her. I didn't memorize the Constitution. I didn't have parents who wondered about my day. I was broken, pretty much. Although I didn't know it then. And though I was indeed a nerd, I got by with mostly B's that turned to C's as I got older. That didn't stop her from coming in to my house almost every day, chasing me and kissing me. I hung out with her because I didn't want to disappoint her. I let her kiss me because I didn't want to disappoint her. I went to the dance with her because I didn't want to make her upset. But in the end, I wonder if all that just made things worse. We rode bikes on logging roads, ran through cornfields, and she would always talk, and I would always listen. I don't know what she saw in me. I was a third wheel even when there were just the two of us. But without her, I would not have learned more about AJ. I don't know how she started on the subject, but somehow we were sitting there pretending we knew how to fish, and the subject of him came up. I said I didn't much like him, and given how he treated me in dodgeball, gave me the stink eye, and pushed me into lockers when he saw me, I figured he didn't much like me either. She said it sucks, but don't you wonder what caused him to act that way? What his home life is like? I said I didn't. She told me that since she lived right next to him, she could hear them sometimes. His father was a mean drunk. I have seen him beat the stuff out of him and his mom a bunch of times. And when he doesn't do that, he goes outside and kicks their dog that they keep chained up out back. Oh, I said. That explains quite a bit. I tried to change the subject. After we leave school, after we graduate, things will get better for us. For both of us. And AJ too, I said. Is that so? Kids often imitate their parents, she said, even if unconsciously. Not me. I am going to argue. I am not going to argue all the time and raise kids I don't want like my parents, I said. Whatever you say, she said, and got on her bike. To be continued, this is a pretty long, short story. It's probably going to be about 4 videos.